Hi, everyone. Today is June 16th, and this is the SIG architecture, the main meeting. Today, we have two items on the agenda, and both are from Rian. Rian, did you want to walk us through the items from you? I'm going to share my screen so that you don't have to do it.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, my internet's a little choppy. I hope my audio comes through good. Basically, both topics are from conformance, but it's so the first bit is a few tests that we've got in. There is the first point is an ineligible endpoint. So the node endpoints has been discussed in quite some detail. Clayton, you previously made a very nice comment about why it shouldn't be eligible. And then I took the issue to the SIG node mailing list, and also I made a PR to move it into ineligibility and shared that also with SIG node, and I got some feedback. Everybody's good with that, so I just need an approve on that if nobody have any objections, and we can merge those in and make them ineligible. Initially in that email, I only had the two node endpoints, and then I added the last one, which I missed. So there's actually three. There's a delete collection, which also makes no sense that it's in there. So I also shared that with SIG node, and all seems to be happy to make that ineligible.
Do you want to take a last look, Clayton, and we can ship this?
Yeah, I got to log into GitHub. It's been over 3 weeks, and so everything in my entire universe is logged out. So give me just 1 sec. I'll do it as we're going.
Oh, welcome back from your vacation.
So glad to have you back, Clayton. We missed you at the conformance meeting last week.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have declined that one. I had no intent to go.
No worry. It was very low attendance anyhow. So that's why I took the liberty to bring the things here, because we're running out of time. There is 7 weeks left of this release before test freeze. And we have 10 endpoints. That's the next point that I'm raising. 10 endpoints that needs review, and I think they're good to go. I don't want to be the judge on behalf of anybody, but I think they're pretty well sorted. So if we can have some eyes on those 3 tests, I have asked in SIG Arch, I have of case conformance channel, I have directly asked in API machinery, but many people have taken leave. It was KubeCon, but I'm just afraid we're going to run out of time if we don't get these in now, because we have at least one other test waiting in the queue that is going to cause a merge conflict. We don't want to rebase and make it complicated. So we need these in, and then I'm going to bring in more endpoints with another test after this. So it's kind of a queue, and the happy news here, we started off with 45 endpoints for this release. Once we get all that's here merged, we're going to have 21 endpoints left. And we have some more in the queue. So we're really banging it out to try and get to Detroit with the news of 100% coverage.
I'll remove the hold on this one. Hold, cancel.
There is another test in the queue that I didn't bring here because it's very well being evaluated and commented on by SIG apps. They're very helpful. Just took a while to get the reaction because of KubeCon and all that, but now the comments are rolling and Steven's doing some great updates.
Do you want to fix this so we can get an approve, Rian, or do you want to do it after?
I'll have to do it after.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'll be around for the afternoon, so I'll
okay.
just tag it when I see the update come in.
That would be great.
3 of them. Never mind. I'll stop fiddling here. Okay, then the other one was you were asking for 3 other PRs to be approved.
Yeah, no, obviously first reviewed and agreed upon.
Reviewed and
I did ask Jordan because he's commented on some of these before, and I did ask him to have a look at it, but I assume he's also out of office. I know he took some holiday after KubeCon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think he's coming back sooner if he's back today.
Yeah, he's back, but he hasn't gotten to this pile of things yet.
Because the most helpful people is always Clayton and Jordan, and I feel terrible that I don't want to ping you guys directly and say, please help me. But also I need.
Are we really helpful if it's hard to find us? I feel like that kind of counters out the being helpful. Maybe we just do it because we feel so guilty.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll guilt trip you about it, and then hopefully we can kill it. Thanks, Clayton, because I always feel terrible to really push you and Jordan, and I know you're busy.
Guilt is the most effective scheduling technique that I respond to. So.
I'll use it then shamelessly.
Please do.
Okay. So I made sure that Clayton is assigned to these three. I'm going to close these three. Yes, close. Okay, back here. So 7 weeks. Yes, we got that. Hopefully we can land these 4 today. If they're in. Okay.
Yeah, if we can get them in today, in 2 weeks' time, Clayton, I'll ping you with the other one, and then we'll really be under 20 by the end of the release, which is super exciting. If you just look back on API Snoop, where we were 2 years ago when I started on this, we were I think 40%. We're gonna break 95 properly this release, so it's super exciting. All right, then if everybody's good with those topics, then
one sec, Rian. So today is your last working day for this week, right?
Correct. Today is Friday.
So I will
for me.
So I will watch those 4 and ping Clayton tomorrow if
all right,
if they don't land. Okay.
Really appreciate if they get the LG team approved. Both me and Stephen over the weekend will keep an eye on them, make sure if there's anything that needs retesting or make sure they go in, because we're quite keen. A sticky thing that we have now is because of the size of the logs, they trimmed down the test grid. So you can't see the 2-week flake free. But what we do, both me and Stephen, follow the test grid daily, then check for flakes.
Okay.
So there's a bit of an integrity thing when we come back and tell you it passed. I hope there's no pushback, or because we can't show you the 2 weeks anymore. So, but
yeah, the test grid doesn't show, but we should be able to pull the information from GCS bucket if necessary. We'll trust you, but if necessary, people can go there and check too.
Yeah, and if it's flaking, we force it in while flaking, we're gonna have the issue anyhow later. So it's not in our best interest to get it in.
Right. There's one other way to check, right? Like we have the aggregated stats. Oh no, the aggregated stat is also 2 weeks. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Okay. So want to talk about the next one?
Yes, please. Okay. The next one, if you can open that PR, it was a change that Stephen was working on a test, and he started running into issues, and it turned out and he actually stumbled upon this PR because things kept on failing. And if you look at the changed files, you'll see there is several conformance tests that has been updated. I can't remember exactly. I have to open the link to remember what the update was. They changed permissions.
The patch is better.
Oh yes, yeah. So they changed security policy on this, which is a needed change. But my concern is not with specifically this PR, but we have at the moment a policy, as we just went through. If you want a conformance test, we don't want it to be flaky. It needs to sit for 2 weeks to prove itself, and then it can be merged in. But now what happened here is they updated several conformance tests with a security level change, which could be breaking for some people if it get backported, which it would. This wouldn't, but looking at future changes, we need to think about the policy around allowing conformance tests to be updated. So what we discussed internally yesterday, what a possibility is, if you want to make a change, you need to copy the test and then make your change, turn it into an E2E test again, let that run in parallel with the conformance test for 2 weeks. And then once that passes, you basically delete the conformance test and promote the E2 again to conformance. The other option is you roll back the conformance test, which I don't like, because it could be, once they do that, we could set with some orphans that because of the change, there's endpoints that become untested again. There's a risk in there. And I'm also looking for, the reason why this worries me is when we finish this work, I would still monitor API Snoop. We just automated the updating this week. So it will be updated. The PR will become available to check whether anything changed in the coverage. But if I don't want us to dig another hole later on because we mess with conformance tests.
Yeah, I like the first option for sure. Now the question is there a way for us to catch that a conformance test was updated and ping, make sure that we can get sign-offs from the conformance test data folks? That is a problem, right? Like being able to identify when a test is touched, whether it is a conformant test or not. When all you're doing is editing whatever is happening within the thing, it has to be caught manually, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's several types of ways that it's just going to make that really hard. Like someone changes common utility functions, even if we split out the tests into their own files, it's still going to be a little problematic. I mean, certainly better monitoring when conformance tests become flaky probably is the ultimate. Like we're at the end of the day, it's about getting the flakiness back down for those because they are such an important signal, which is a subset of a SIG testing responsibility on flaky, making sure that flakiness is monitored already. Is there a larger thing that we can hook into that isn't specific to conformance here?
Then the one thing, I fully agree that the one signal would be that the tests go flaky, but what my concern is, it could be that you make a small change and the change drop 1 or 2 endpoints that was inside the test, but because of the change now they're not. And the only way we'll pick that up is by when API Snoop is updated, it will become the coverage will go down from 100% to whatever and show as untested.
Yeah,
which would require
whatever we can do on the API Snoop side, that is the best way to do it. The other signal is definitely, the conformance test going flaky, and that can't be done in API Snoop. We'll have to do it by monitoring the test grid.
Yeah, the flakiness, API Snoop only see coverage, so it doesn't care about the flakiness.
That's right.
So from II's side, we will take responsibility to keep an eye that we always sit on 100% after we finish all the tech debt.
So
and then CI signal would have to look at the
correct. So that is what we need to tell the CI signal to pay specific attention to the conformance test flaking. They already do that, right? Like they already do that. It's just that it takes them a little bit longer to catch up, and one of us notices it earlier than them.
And the moment anything goes, loses coverage, because I'm also monitoring at the moment, because it does happen. We had it two releases ago that Jordan's team updated a conformance test and made a change to the conformance test, and it caused exactly that, to drop 1 endpoint.
Yeah, theoretically,
I'm already checking.
Yeah, theoretically, even when you change kubelet, for example, right, and not touching a test, it might still lead to conformance failures.
Exactly. And from the experience, they were super helpful. Within a day, that the problem was solved and all back in.
Yeah.
So I think if this group is happy by CI signal checking and that it's allowed to change a conformance test without the 14 days, then monitoring would be then the solution.
Yeah, that's the best we can do at this point, given the number of people we have and the number of things that we need to do, right?
I'm happy. I'll keep an eye on the API snoop with the II team and then see how signal. You think we need to reach out to them, Dims, to specifically inform them, or?
Yes, please send them a note on Slack or on their mailing list to watch out for conformance test flakiness, and tell us earlier than later. Well, they can log an issue and ping us like usual.
I will also speak to the people on our side working on API Snoop and see if there's some sort of way that they can pick up when there is conformance test changes, which will all automatically flag us to have a look and see if something goes funny. So it's kind of an early warning, but I don't think it's going to be easy to pick it up.
We do have one way to do that, right? Like we have the aggregated test results, and we can say the test is conformance, right? And then it is in the CA. And we can actually type in a job there too, right? So look here, for example, right? This is failing in kind. This is failing in node. So this is one way to go look at it, like, how many things are failing and which jobs they are failing in. So if we have a list of jobs, we can do the regex here and, ask the CA signal folks to, like, oh yeah, let's do this. So let's get the list of jobs from the, release blocking and release informing, and construct the regex for this field and tell them to monitor it, right?
So they basically create a specific
give them a specific URL that they can watch every day or every other day.
Okay. I'll look into it. If I'm not sure, I'll reach out to you.
Yeah, just ping me and we'll work it out. Yeah,
exactly how it works. Okay, no problem. I think that solves that. Thanks.
Yeah.
And that is all my points. I don't know if there's any questions about that.
Thanks, Rian.
Thanks, Dims.
Hey, Tahir. Welcome to this group. How are you doing? And what would you like to talk about?
Hey, we had some discussion on a KEP that is being worked on in SIG auth. And actually, I feel it's kind of silly because I sent a message to the list, and now both of the points on which we were said, hey, we should go talk to SIG Arch about this. Actually, we are not going to do either of them probably, so it's kind of pointless. But basically, the 2 points were, we were originally going to, so I don't know how much you guys know about the in-cluster certificate signing architecture, like sending certificate signing requests to a signer and having them approved. The signer name is like a URL. And this KEP is proposing a new type of cluster scoped object that is sort of fairly tightly associated with a particular signer. We were originally going to do that by creating some special naming convention to encode the signer name as a Kubernetes resource name. But there's, because of the constraints placed on Kubernetes resource names, like there's not a non-ugly way to make that convention work.
So constraints on names, there's different sets of name constraints, and if necessary, we could have a broader discussion about whether those are too restrictive, although there's a lot of infrastructure in the ecosystem now that probably hobbles us a bit. Who was specifically bringing up name limitations?
So actually, it looks like we just found the section right there.
Oh, this one? Yeah.
Yeah. And below there's some code like proposing this. Specifically, so it's like we need, like if we have a signer called example.com/mysigner that has a slash in it, which is not allowed in the resource name.
And that's because Go's standard library does not correctly handle path encoding, which is the primary reason why we just basically punted it And there's also like various security concerns around that. So slash is one of those names that's probably always going to stay in the restricted set for names. But that's the only character that should be in the restricted set, and that in the sense that that's the one that's fundamentally tied to the choices Go made early in the standard library.
Yeah. So the proposal as currently in the KEP is to take the dash as an escape character. So that dash dash means dash, and dash slash, like the literal text slash dash means a slash, which is like super ugly. And fortunately, like I said, I think we're actually going to change it so that the name can be arbitrary, but there is a spec.signer name field, and use admission to control to enforce that you can only create something with a valid.spec.signer name.
With a valid one or a duplicate one?
With a valid one.
Okay.
Based on
that's probably okay then. Yeah.
Having it work kind of the same way as certificate signing requests. They have a .spec.signer name field, and there's some special admission control that goes into like.
Generally, we would just say there's validation. So you said admission,
Yeah.
and for a second I thought that you were talking about using that to enforce uniqueness outside of what the validation rule would, and that would just be validation implemented via admission control. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems reasonable. The name encoding thing. If we could encode slashes, there are use cases for it. I think at this point that ship has sailed. And so slash would be the one that would be special. And that is a little unusual of a encoding scheme. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever tried to do something like that. I don't remember. We definitely had gone through this with usernames, identity names, and various folks doing stuff around the ecosystem, right? Because you do want some uniqueness. Tokens ran into this as well. And in almost every one of those cases, we just said either we're base 64 encoding binary data into the name, like for tokens, that's been something someone's done. Or we just don't put those characters in and we work around it. I'm not sure someone today has an escaping system. So the approach we picked probably is going to be less frustrating.
Yeah.
Base 64.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds bad. And we also considered like, well, we could just drop the slash, but then you can force collisions, which is also bad for this use case.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about this in quite a while, but there's probably a reasonable, if we needed to do some sort of escaping pattern, I would actually recommend that we do something across the board. Now, one of the challenges would be anybody who has a name that's only limited. So someone could have a aggregated API server that the only thing that they don't allow is a slash. That's a totally valid thing you can do. And clients would be required to, like generic clients in the Kube ecosystem, Kube Control, various config tools would be expected to work with that. I bet you they don't. So there's other wrinkles there. Certainly, I think we did a pretty good job of not tying name to file system safe characters. Most people are using, the names of the file is similar to the resource name, but doesn't have to be identical. But I would probably say if you ever come up with another need for escaping, it would be a reasonable thing for us to be like, can we pick something that's reasonable across the board? However, at this point in our life cycle, that'd be a very hard thing to change effectively.
Yeah.
2.0.
And so for this other point, it's a similar thing. Someone raised the objection, hey, you're creating this cluster trust bundle object. It has only a status field. So it's not a Kubernetes object, trademark, TM, because it doesn't have a spec. There's an architecture conventions doc I found that handles the case of, hey, what if your object has spec but no status? In which case, that's fine. You can even name the spec field something more useful for your use case. But there's nothing about what if your object only has a status field.
If your object only has a status field, I would highly recommend putting everything else in spec. And we don't definitely, because the intent of status is to indicate that there is that the object itself doesn't represent truth, like role bindings, those are truth. You create them, they're true. The mental idea behind status would be that there's some truth that takes time to emerge, or, like, because like PVC bindings, they're one way. Some pod status is technically one way, pod phase. Those one-way statuses, basically there implies there's some delay. And so if there's some delay, then there's an implication that even if the delay is one way, some spec might be updated after the fact. So I would probably say we can make a recommendation to API conventions. I would always recommend spec if you have status.
Okay, so in this case, we will be adding a spec field for an unrelated reason because we want to put sign name in there. But in this case, like, the status field is really not spec. It's controller updated state. It has a conditions field where the controller will report whether or not it's
that's not actually like, so status doesn't mean spec paired. It means derived from reality that's different from the request. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but the implication would be if you ever have a status block or things that act like status, you should pair everything that's not statusy into a spec, would be my recommendation.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I'm saying in this case, we don't have anything that's not statusy.
You're asking, yeah. So if you hadn't, okay, sorry, I misunderstood. If you don't have any spec yet, should you create an empty spec field? I would probably say, just off the cuff, and I'll take this to a PR to API conventions, I would probably recommend creating an empty spec field if you go so far as having status. I don't know that it matters. The one nice thing would be that no one can create anything, but there's a little bit of the human nature, which is eventually some field's going to show up.
Yeah.
And the part of like putting things into structs, like from a conventions perspective, is that we're all fallible and that eventually we need something more. And we kind of have that advice for when you have Booleans, right? We say, don't use Booleans because you can't really ever interpret the full scope of the field. Don't use one field if you think that, or put it in a parent struct if you think that something else is going to come along later that would be related. Mm-hmm. And I think that applies here.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be taken to excess though.
That makes sense. All right. I have one other question if there's no other business in this.
Yeah.
Too.
Go for it.
Okay. And maybe there's an answer to this somewhere, but I'm still pretty new to like actually doing open source work in Kubernetes. So we're proposing adding this v1 alpha 1 cluster trust bundle object. We also want to propose at the alpha stage of the KEP, adding the ability to reference it from some other objects that are currently like v1 beta 1 and v1 by adding new fields that could refer to this cluster trust bundle by name. How do we do that? Do we need to recreate a new v1 alpha 1? And
those would be feature gated flags generally. If there's no other purpose, so these flags don't exist today, correct?
Correct.
So
it would be a new field in like mutating webhook configuration.
Sure. So new field comes in. No one should be able to use that until that's promoted to beta. Therefore, it's feature gated. Since it's feature gated, it's likely that these would be related if there's no other user. Even if there was another user, that would still be an alpha field. So it's an alpha field inside a stable or v1 beta API. So it's feature gated or feature flag gated. And then when you decide to promote, it would probably be, we would not promote that field until something that it references is not beta. And if it could select two things, like if you had something that it did it on being beta that's not this alpha object, that would be another case where you might say selecting an alpha object requires the gate to be enabled. So if like, let's say you have like an object reference and you support 3 resource types, the resource types that aren't supported would still be behind a feature gate while they are alpha, I think would be what I would recommend in this case, which is if it's a stable object and it's not pointing to something that's beta or higher, it's always feature gated.
Okay, so it's fine that people can see this field and it shows up in a generated code. It's just feature gated so that if you actually try to use it, the API server will not let you.
Correct, and you have to go through you have to jump through all the hoops that adding any feature gated field is, which is a little bit more work than generally adding a new alpha object, which you don't need all those clauses because the appearance of the object itself. So it's just more work to do the feature gate than to put the field in an alpha object. But
okay,
it's less work than dealing with people getting confused about what's alpha and not, and asking for support and getting broken when we change the feature.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
So you're unblocked now. You can summarize the discussion, Tahir. I didn't follow everything, so you will have to do it.
Yeah, I think the main thing is, yes, if there is a need in the future, we can come settle on a sort of name encoding scheme. We don't need this right now, so I'm not gonna bother pushing that. And then we should probably have an empty spec field if our object, even if our object is currently only statusy.
There are probably fewer things that will break having an empty status that you probably would want to work.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, it also gives you a place to put documentation that says there's no field, but we might anticipate controlling how this is used in the future. Otherwise, you'd have to stick that at a higher place on the object, which gets weird. Not that our documentation on API types is really great today.
Okay, and there is one action item for Clayton to file a PR against the conventions doc.
To connect some of the analogies here.
Okay. Okay, sounds good to me. Is there anybody else wanting to talk about anything else? Brian, Mayank, Ben?
No, I'm good. I'm just trying to attend as many times as possible and follow what's going on.
Sounds good, Mayank. Thank you. Thanks.
Same.
Man. Yeah.
Just listening in.
Yep. Just wanted to say hi. I just joined ThoughtWorks as a principal. I'm pretty big on open source, so just seeing where I can help in various projects.
Oh, welcome to this group. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm glad to give you back some time today. Thanks a lot, everyone. Let's see you all in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all the help.